I'm just gonna suggest, having had to watch the last meeting because I wasn't here, somebody here go sit up at that microphone, and if you could all make an extra effort to
Hey,
talk into the
I
microphone,
missed
that would
that
be
show
fantastic.
last week.
Somebody
Oh,
here,
Dan.
Jerry,
I'll jump.
Okay.
somebody.
I'm just trying to stop an update.
You might actually graduate to a better chair, Dan.
So,
It's possible.
Place to sit here, I'm on my phone.
Someone moved this chair up a couple of inches. It's delightful. It's better height for me.
I do.
Oh, jeez.
I'm just letting this be a heads up. Ready when you are, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I'd like to call to order the May 22nd, 2025 Housing Production Plan Update Working Group Meeting. The Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Pursuant to Governor Healy's March 28th, 2025 order extending to the temporary provisions pertaining to the open meeting law until June 30th, 2027, this meeting of the Housing Production Plan Update Working Group is in hybrid format and is being recorded. All meeting recordings will be made available after proceedings on the town's website and YouTube channel. Meeting, YouTube, and Zoom links could be found at www.suttonma.org/cable-departments. Do a roll call. Roll call votes for all motions are required for both hybrid and remote meetings. If board committee members are attending remotely, board committee members must identify themselves and state if they are attending in person or remotely at the beginning of the meeting after opening statement. Any board committee member who is participating remotely must have the video on while speaking during all votes. We'll start. Normand. Stephanie?
She's on, right?
Stephanie, I see you online. If you're there, can you unmute and turn your video on? Maybe technical difficulties. We'll move on. Jim?
Present in person.
Michael?
Michael Gagan, present in person.
Mario?
Hi, this is Stephanie Cavino. I can't hear anything on your end. I'm sorry if you're speaking.
Okay, we are speaking.
Okay, I'll work on that in a second.
Pam is taking a look and double checking.
And we don't have her video either.
Chris, I see you're online. Can you just confirm, can you hear anything on?
That's right.
Stephanie, can you hear me?
Yes, I can now. Thank you.
Okay, there we go.
Well, can she put her video on?
Stephanie, we're just doing roll call. Can you put your video on and confirm if you're here and if you're remote?
I'm Stephanie Camino, remote, and as soon as I'm allowed to turn on my video, I will.
Okay,
Oh.
Pam's working on that.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think we went through Mario, correct? Brian Jamrose? Andrea?
Present in person.
Don?
Present in person.
Pam?
Present in person.
Dan?
present in person.
Wesley Stanhope, present and in person. Brian Stevenson?
Present in person.
Jerry?
Present in person.
Christine?
Present in person?
Peter?
Present in person.
All right, public forum, limited to 3 minutes per topic. Discussions or comments about town employees or agency members shall be avoided so as not to violate individuals' rights. I would like to remind the public that public forum is limited to a period at the beginning of each meeting and not during the working sessions. So I do not see anybody here in person. Anybody on Zoom? Okay, we'll move on. So do you want to discuss about the meeting minutes?
Yes, I want to apologize for sending them out this afternoon, and we did receive some changes from both Jen and Dawn made a correction for the adjournment motion. So I would recommend, can we just hold them until the next meeting?
Sure,
Would that be okay, or?
I suppose I'll be fine. Be a cleaner way of doing it.
Yes.
Okay, sounds good. So now, our goal here tonight is to review different sections of the housing production plan that we haven't reviewed yet. So, we'll start at the section 1.1 outreach. Hopefully, some of these will be fairly straightforward. I know we could go in the same order or just start at the 1.1. We have 1.1 outreach, 1.2 shared dedicated affordable housing coordinator, 1.3 CPA, 1.4 is a housing trust. We do have the 3.1 and the 3.2.
The 2.5, we didn't do OS. We didn't do open space residential development either.
So the open space residential developments, Jen maybe could explain a little bit more, but that gets pulled out.
Right, the OSRD, the Open Space Residential Development Bylaw, and the Accessory Apartment Bylaw that were referenced in the last plan. I'll start with the OSRD. The major changes that were recommended there were really the affordability inclusion. So since we're already addressing that under the inclusionary zoning section, and the other things that were suggested in there are actually kind of not in practice now. My suggestion would be to just pull that section entirely from the old plan, that there's no need to include it in this one.
So would you be keeping it in the bylaws?
The open space residential is in the bylaw now. It's been in the bylaw for a while. So yeah, there was no plan to pull OSRD. The plan was to add a minimum 15% affordability to that. So that was one of the recommendations from the last plan.
Okay, so I'm going to be, again, devil's advocate. When I reviewed the OSRD section, here, it sent me to the zoning bylaw section. And when you read the OSRD, why do we need a separate cottage housing?
Because it's not the same animal. OSRD is individual owned lots. There's no requirement for limitations on the size of the dwelling unit. There's no requirement for true cottage architecture, size, and massing. If you tuned in on the Compass Rock Open Space Residential Development that was just approved on Purgatory Road, the only thing that's gonna look different to you between that project and any other subdivision in town is that the lots are smaller. Those will still all probably have 3-4 bedroom homes. They'll just be on smaller lots. So the OSRD does not force smaller massing, smaller sizes.
But doesn't it have a minimum lot size of a third of whatever the zoning district currently allows, or 15,000 square feet, whichever is less?
It does have a lower allowance in exchange for preservation of open space, but it's not at all the same animal as a cottage bylaw, not at all. So, again.
It does reference cottages in the bylaw, so should the wording of that bylaw be changed if you?
I can certainly look at the wording and see why and where it references
And
cottages.
it does also talk about minimum spacing, and it says, if structures, regardless of the number of dwelling units, are not located on individual lots, the minimum spacing between structures should not be less than 20 feet, and that was the cottage housing bylaw separation between the units, so it seemed to have a lot of the same dimensional stuff.
Christine, when it says cottages, does it say cottages or does it say cottage housing? Because a lot of folks get confused. Cottages are cottages, they're homes, we're not talking about a housing district.
And going from even the sections we have right now, there are 7 sections on the plan to get through, and that doesn't even include that
All
one
right,
right
we
now.
can I can send Jen an email.
Yeah,
Sure, I'm happy to take a look at that. But yeah, it is a different animal, but I'm happy to take a look at that where there might be overlaps and
Well, yeah, because I think
address that.
the OSRD also had like a 5-acre minimum, which was the original bylaw that Jerry had in his masters, had 5 acres, 12 units, and when you do this,
Bylaw.
it was a sample bylaw that was provided to you.
In,
Hey, Pam? Can I be able to share?
All right, so yeah, just send me those comments, Christine, I'll take a look. And the other section was the accessory apartment bylaw. Again, state law has, of course, made a move with that. Sutton has our existing bylaw, and the plan right now with the planning board is to keep our existing bylaw. And if people want to do an ADU larger than 900 square feet, they would go through that process. The board may propose some changes to that bylaw, but not this year. So people would still be able to get an ADU up to 1,200 square feet, but it would have the same restrictions it currently does as voted by the residents of Sutton, if it's between 901 and 1,200.
Just for the record, I think ADUs are a great way to increase housing.
Now, just to start,
May I ask a question? So on that note, Jen, when you look at the plans for,
Yeah,
when you look at the plans for a single-family unit, so we're just in the R1, it's just a straight out of the box house on an R1 lot, single family, pick a number, 3,000 square feet. Do you ever have a conversation with the owner saying, well, you know, if you did this, this, and that, you could have an ADU right here?
No, I have no interaction in the planning
On that,
department with
okay.
a single lot development that never
Okay.
sees the planning board.
Because where I was taking it is, if we had more single-family houses that came through the pipeline with ADUs on them, and the law changes and the ADUs can be dedicated to affordable, then every time we put up a single family, we would have the option of having it.
Yeah, I mean,
Do
that
you
would
see
be
what I'm saying?
nice. We
Yeah.
can certainly talk more about the complications in a private party having to carry out those restrictions, but yeah.
But what I'm just saying is, there's other ways to
Yeah.
add to the numbers, and maybe that's a
Oh,
way to think
absolutely.
about it.
As we've said from the beginning, it's
As long
multifaceted.
as you can deed restrict just a piece of your property.
Just
not the whole-
just the
That-
area
that's-
of it.
right.
Yep. And it's optional, right? It's not mandatory that it be, but that you use it
Right.
always as affordable.
Right.
But it would go into the head count
Yeah.
of potentially affordable.
People
Right.
would just have to be comfortable with the fact that they'll have zero control
Yeah.
over who will rent that unit.
Yeah.
None.
Yeah, unless.
Whoever comes off the list first is who's gonna rent your unit.
Okay.
Yep.
And that is a
That's
huge
the only
thing
drawback.
That
for
is a
people
drawback.
to get their head around.
Yeah,
And
okay.
giving up resale value, because once it's deed restricted, it's deed restricted.
Restricted, yep.
No, 30
Fair
years.
enough.
So the
30
next
years.
So
owner,
30
let's-
years, not
let's get on
perpetuity.
to section 1.1 outreach. Let's get some of these reviewed. So 1.1, this is a recommendation that the town continue to conduct ongoing community outreach and education on housing. So from this section of a review, does anybody have an issue with this, concern, or with this section?
no, that's not educate anybody ever.
Just a-
I'm thinking we can all do a thumbs up on that.
I don't think we want to touch that right now.
Okay. Just a little, it's grammar.
Grammar?
And then I
Yeah.
don't know, is attract the right word or foster? Community support, you're attracting it or you're fostering it?
Foster sounds nicer. Okay, so it's grammar. It's
Yeah,
not,
grammar. It was
not a
just
material
grammar.
change.
You wanna-
While you're there.
Yeah.
Wes, are you gonna do thumbs up, thumbs down on each of
Let's
these?
do a thumbs up, thumbs down on these things. So for 1.1. Okay, I think that's
George.
pretty good.
Everyone.
Stephanie's got her
Okay.
thumb up too.
Stephanie's thumbs up. Okay, so the section 1.2, this one here, myself and Jen talked about, is securing an affordable housing coordinator as a shared resource. And it's basically somebody that could help us, like, the 15 of us are not gonna be here doing this every single week. I know that. So it's who could actually be here to help progress our affordable housing in town, but that's an expensive resource as well. So how do you share that resource? You know, having a shared resource between other towns and communities around us instead of a hired resource that's here 40 hours a week. So this is, the only change between this version and the previous is that it's more of a shared resource between other communities instead of a full-time resource. So is everybody good with this? Or any issues, concerns? I think, I've started to see thumbs up already.
I'm good.
Okay,
Yep.
okay, so that's good.
I just had another little housekeeping comment.
Hey.
And you do have Stephanie too.
Oh, Stephanie, is that,
I was just gonna say there's a typo in the title. It says resource.
that's just a Boston accent from somebody coming out, I suppose. That's the Irish Boston
And I
accent.
had another, so we mentioned CPA funds, but we haven't defined them, so I didn't know if you wanted to move the CPA up before this, or just define CPA in here.
Yeah,
Because the next section deals with CPA.
I'll
So-
highlight that now, because when I go through reports, the first time I use abbreviation, I'll explain what that is, but I've been
Yeah.
moving things around.
Yeah. And then, is it request for proposals or request for proposal? For
Singular.
housing coordinator, singular.
Request for proposal.
Yeah. Where do you see that?
It's in the, 1, 2, 3, 4, where the sentence that begins
Request for
proposal.
proposal.
And then you're gonna automatically replace economic development director for planning director all through the document.
Yeah.
Community Development Director.
I think it should be proposals.
Yeah,
That's
it
the
depends on
term.
who's writing it,
Title,
whether
too.
it's plural or not.
Secure and affordable. On the index, it said secure a dedicated. So if you look at the index title, in order
Yep.
to match it.
We'll have to, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, just since you have it up, might as well fix it while you're doing it.
And I would say that it should be
On the index.
plural proposals. That's usually the term is request for
Secure a
proposals.
dedicated affordable housing coordinator.
I'm good with that.
And then over here it's secure and affordable housing as a shared resource, so I don't know which one you wanna make it match.
Did you hear Stephanie?
What was Stephanie say? Sorry, Stephanie?
The term typically is request for proposals. So multiple proposals come in, you review them, and then you choose one.
Okay.
And then,
Fine.
is it relationships with developers or relationship? First sentence, next page, to establish relationships with developers or relationship with developers, I don't know.
Plural,
Yes.
yeah.
Tomorrow.
Sort
Okay.
of brings us through the chair to a larger question. On these comments, Christine and folks, that are more typographic and syntax, would it make sense to just raise it and then say, I'll give you a markup of it?
Yes. We could go through that
Is
together.
that appropriate? No?
Very.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So section 1.3 is adopt the Community Preservation Act. I'm seeing thumbs up already.
And you're not getting into the details. That would be taken care of at the actual consideration stage, right? You're not saying it should be 1% or 3% or 0.5%. You're just saying,
Recommendation that it
okay,
should be
good.
done.
That's.
Yeah, it's saying that
most
surcharge can be 1 to 3%.
Okay, good.
It's
No,
not-
I think that's totally appropriate.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure we were all clear on that.
Stephanie?
I think that it would be helpful to note in this section whether it's in responsible parties or whether, I know last time we talked about, are we going to add a sort of next step or action item part of each of these, which I know is more work. But it might be helpful to mention that there are a lot of organizations that would assist the community in adopting this if they were interested, including the Community Preservation Trust and organizations like Mass Audubon, for instance. I also think it would be helpful to, while you don't want to get into the weeds, it might be helpful to mention that there are several exemptions. I know part of the reason why we want to have affordable housing is to have housing for seniors. And so one of the exemptions that you can adopt is to not to have exemptions for seniors. So if you're 65 plus, you wouldn't have to pay this. And also exemptions for the first $100,000 of a property. So again, it reduces the amount, but it helps those who have a lower value home. So you don't have to say we recommend you adopt those necessarily, even though I would say that, to make it more palatable and to make it more effective in terms of senior housing in particular and affordable housing.
Yeah, the exemption should definitely be mentioned.
Yeah, I agree.
The exemptions,
Exemptions.
Absolutely.
the specific exemptions or the
From
exemptions
The
are
ones that are
available?
available. The
Exemptions
ones
are
that are
available.
available. Mm-hmm.
And Jen, what do we mean by exemptions in this context?
So the law allows you a
Yeah,
palette
where-
of exemptions or a
Example,
variety to
exempted
choose
the first
from
100,000.
as you're adopting the CPA. So the common one that most communities say is they exempt the first 150 usually values of a
I
property
think that was-
value.
Yeah, in a later
That's
paragraph, I
fine.
saw that.
So it-
And then, so there's a
Hey,
thing
Jen,
you
I
can
thought it
choose
was,
from.
yeah,
I thought it was
which means
capped
that
at
the
100.
tax does not apply to that portion of the value. Okay, all right.
I thought it was 2.
Yeah, we looked at that,
Now-
we looked at that before. I thought about going higher, but then when we did the research, it was capped at 100. So
Yep.
that's why in here, Stephanie, I don't know if you read ahead, but I put the example in that it caps it at 100.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you're certainly
Yeah.
more up on the latest than I am. Absolutely. So, yeah, I think we have.
Yeah, I would just also add the other one about, sorry, I forgot that one was in there, about seniors though. So
Yeah,
there's senior exemption. If you're 65 plus, you don't have to pay the tax at all.
yeah, there should be a list of all available exemptions that you can choose from.
On an appendices?
Or not in, I would
Wanna
say
put it
right
in
in
the
the
text?
thing. I
Okay.
mean, it's not a mile long.
Okay,
you know?
that's fine. I didn't know how long it was, Jen. That's fine.
Yeah, it's not a mile
Yep.
long.
Okay,
Because the
that's
text
simple
flows
enough.
pretty well there.
So that's good.
So there is available a Community Preservation Act map from November of 2024 that shows you which communities in the state have already adopted CPA. It's a nice little, we were talking about visuals last week.
Yeah.
That would be a nice little add-in. You can just Google it. It's November 24,
Yeah.
communities that adopted CPA.
That's on like communitypreservation.org, right, Christine, I think?
Didn't note it in my notes.
It's okay. I'm pretty
It
sure.
is a very
it's-
nice map.
I think it's on that website that you guys, that we sent to you. Good
Oh.
idea.
Then there's the create a municipal affordable housing trust funds.
Yep.
Starting to see a thumbs up already. Okay,
I can't see what you're doing, Stephanie. What are you doing? Is that a, Steph, is that no thumbs or?
Did we thumbs up for the
Hand over her
CPA?
face. She's on duty
Yep.
there.
Yes.
is that a thumbs up stuff, yeah? Okay,
Okay.
So one question in the lead-in on the last paragraph. It starts, if the town of Sutton passes CPA, passing the CPA is not a contingency to establishing the housing trust fund, though, correct?
It doesn't have to be, no, so I would
Okay.
eliminate that.
That's what I was
Yeah.
gonna ask. Thank you, Jen.
The only reason I included that is because I believe in some mechanisms, the CPA can contribute to the housing trust.
Oh,
So I wanted to
Can or
link the two of
cannot,
them
Jen?
together.
Say it again.
In some cases, a CPA can contribute to the housing trust. So that's why I wanted to put that piece in here about the CPA.
Okay.
It's not material. We
No,
can-
I
we
think
can
it's a
kill it,
great
but-
idea. I think it's a great concept. So what you want to say, in addition to its other advantages, passing the CPA would allow it to be a contributor to the Affordable Trust Fund.
Yes.
There you go.
Just change the tenor of the lead-in.
Cool.
Are we, or did we already?
we,
You
Thumbs
already
up.
did it.
we like thumbs up tonight.
I'll just stay like this.
Yeah.
Okay.
You mentioned Grafton.
Yeah.
It would be nice in this if perhaps you stated one or two of the things that they use the CPA funds for. I know it can be used for historical and that, but do you have any specific examples if you're using Grafton
Gave
as
some,
an
didn't
example?
you?
Yeah, in this case, I talked about how they gave it to the trust.
This is under the housing trust section.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So under CPA, should there be something to show a neighboring town and what they might have used CPA for, just to give the public a reference to what neighboring towns might have used it for, who have, when you're giving an example here, and under CPA, we don't really have an example. Is there a neighbor that's passed one already, and what percentage is it, and this is some of the things they've done?
Well, Douglas just did one, didn't they?
I don't know.
If you want to do that,
There-
it's simple information to obtain on communitypreservation.org. There's a whole chart. It's simple. if the group has thumbs up that they all want to include that, I can certainly,
Yeah, it's a Google search away.
Steph?
So I was just gonna say, there is a box under CPA that says projects that have used CPA
Yeah, I
include.
thought there was.
that
Yeah,
blue
there's that
box,
visual-
but
that-
It's just not local examples.
Right, so local would be more preferable
Okay.
than, I would say, right? Because when you look at the CPA map too, this region seems to be in a region that hasn't really passed it. So if you can get the abutters that have passed it, it's just closer, you know?
Sure.
It's more applicable.
Okay.
okay, dokey.
Oh, and I did have just
On to section.
You know, the Municipal Affordable Housing Trust Act was established, you know, kind of is after.
You already wrote that?
Yeah, but
So here, making headway, maybe you put a little bit about that first and then talk about that, Ms. Culver, just before. I can send you.
this one I think we did.
Okay.
The 40 order. You do it.
Okay. What is it, Jen?
Nothing.
Oh.
I'm just waiting for you to say which section, so I know which page to.
Oh, okay, I thought you were putting your hand up for something.
Nope.
So now,
We didn't necessarily do a straw poll on 40R, 40S, but we did review it the last time.
Yes.
Jerry did do an update. I could bring it up if you just want to take a quick look at it again, just very quickly. But I think it's pretty straightforward. We could wait until the next time when we do a full revision of the HPP for everybody just to review once over. But I think we're pretty good with the 40R, 40S. We just didn't do a thumbs up on it officially.
Might as well. I mean, I like, personally, I like the idea of it. I know we got pretty detailed on the example, but I would say it's a great example.
Okay,
which section of that was that again?
that is section 2.3. That one has two sections on it. 2.3 has the 40R, 40S. Sorry, hold on,
2.2,
sorry,
isn't it?
hold on.
Yeah.
I'm looking at too small here.
2.2.
2.2. 2.2 has got adopt 40R, 40S smart growth zoning as the first section of that. There's a second section of it as well, but we are talking about the 40R, 40S section. Jerry, I don't know if you want to just explain the little tweak you did.
Basically, I just took everyone's comments last week and deleted one little section, added, put in references and so forth for others. Got rid of the one graphic. Still looking, the only thing I'm looking for on it is a rendering of a ground level view of what 40R would look like. I just can't find anything that fits us that I like.
Yeah. And I was saying to Jerry, I think I saw some of those in my, from the National Planning Conference. That'll work from some of the presentations I was in on that. So I'm going to go over those PowerPoints and see if I can grab something for you.
Okay,
That's more Sutton-esque.
Please include a farm-to-table restaurant.
sounds good. So are we good with the 40R, 40S? Okay, we're good with the 40R, 40S. There was the 3.1 public property. Make suitable public property available for affordable housing. Jerry, do you want to explain any updates from the 2019 to the 2025 version?
There was just some verbiage change. Where am I? Sorry, I was trying to find it.
Page 74. You should cross off Central Mass Regional Planning because they will have absolutely nothing to do with making Town of Sutton land available for affordable housing.
Does the select board?
Yes, the select board absolutely will, because they're the ones that would have to surplus it for housing, or if they're the control of it, they would have to authorize use of it in that way.
Hey, Jerry, I know we probably wouldn't put any specific lots in the HPP,
No,
but what, any hypotheses or ideas on what would be the most viable, or?
There's a few different ones. I've gotten feedback on some of what it was previously used for and why it may not, but there are strategies around that, so
What lots are we talking about?
There's a list in the open space recreation plan of all town holdings, and it gives
Oh,
you the
okay.
constraints
Town-
and stuff.
town land,
So
all right.
Jerry has already taken a look, I think, at
Well,
that.
and then I did, and then I removed it with the update that Wes and I discussed earlier today with it, just to keep it simple. Basically, instead of getting into discussions and we're not making decisions on what parcels to select or anything, that's up to the town itself.
Right.
I mean, there's a few different ones that, not to upset anyone, but there's the lot right next door here, which is 5 acres. Part of that's being used as the septic system, I think, what, for the school?
No,
Or
for
s-
town
for-
hall.
Town
for
hall.
town hall. But there's the rest of the property there that could easily be converted. An RFP could be put out for proposals. There are, of course, the 2 lots at the end of my road on Jones Road. That is a potential, but, I mean, not that I would like that.
Love it. You just design it.
Yeah, maybe if I designed it and if we could get that unclaimed parcel down the road.
Your approach, though, not to recommend specific parcels, but again, to be general, because it,
Yes, we're just suggesting that the town should look at this. And then there's the other part, which is state-owned land. Like I had said previously, in February of this year, Massachusetts released the Home for Everyone. It's their housing plan, which is actually looking at state-owned land, which there is quite a few parcels within Sutton itself that the state owns, and converting that into affordable housing.
when you
So-
did your update on that, or is it the form it's in, this one paragraph, is that still the current form? Because it
Yes.
feels like just mentioning town land through an RFP process or the state program might be valuable to just have some, in there, just information on that. Not specific parcels, but you can pursue the development of town land through a town RFP process, and state land may also be available, and then just note that program. Just so there's more information about, kind of,
Yeah, I just haven't
almost
had,
like next steps, but not.
it,
know?
I mean, it does list the LIP.
It does.
What if you just include the number of acres just as a reference of how much it is without identifying what the parcels are?
Yeah,
Actually, I am for a person that generally has unfavorable reactions to giving land away.
Microphone.
I like the way you had described, saying that there were these 4 broad categories of available public or private, or public or state
Unprotected
lands
open
that
space
were
land.
unprotected, that are currently not developed, that might be available if placed in an RFP or another means to attract interest to help us solve the problem. Just put that slant on it with the categories, so that we all agree that we don't want to name like locations, right? We're not saying, the area that Jerry doesn't want at the end of the street or, like that. But yeah, because that's really good, because Jen, I like the idea that it just kind of calls it out and gets people thinking about it without getting it.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, in general, I support kind of Stephanie's general thought that when we recommend these things, and here are some next steps or some steps the community can take if they like this to kind of move in that direction. Find it helpful, because this is an action plan, but, that's up to the group. So the more information you give in these sections without getting in the weeds, obviously, to kind of let the select board who might be reading it, or this person who came to town and they've been rah-rah on this and they want to work on it, know, oh, this is where we can go, this is what we can do. It's helpful.
So areas for immediate investigation by interested parties would be ba-boom, 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 for next steps, yeah.
Would this one here be a good one, like Stephanie has mentioned about having next steps? Because we've been on this committee now, or working group, for like a good few months to put all this together in a recommendation. But this here in itself could be another working group or committee for a half a year to a year to evaluate different locations, the pros and cons, for the resources for these particular sites, working with an architect.
Yeah, that you wouldn't do in here, but you could say,
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Right?
RFP
But
process.
this is a whole other like group of a few
Oh, it
people
is.
to assess all these lands.
Oh,
Yeah, I
absolutely.
And that's
actually
why
like
we
that
probably
idea.
don't want to dive into the lands here.
no,
right?
like I said,
And
I was
value
just,
one over another.
And to me, there's a whole process of what are we solving for? If we're trying to get affordable housing units, what's the best way to get there? Is the best way to take, town land and build units, or is the best way to do one of the other levers that we're talking about? That to me is a whole decision package, different ways to skin the cat, but that's how I think about it.
Yeah, and there's gonna be different opinions on that, and without a doubt, it's gonna take multiple different avenues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to your point, Wes, my
Yep.
thoughts on it are what Jen and Jerry said and Stephanie said, which is to say that,
Microphone.
to bring, to realize the benefits of the area, of the land, the state-owned land and the town-owned land for affordable housing, we would, interested persons would bang, 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 2 sentences.
Yep.
And that's the next step.
Your next steps, yep. We could do that.
So I don't think you need to hit them over the head with it, but,
No.
You were gonna say something,
No, I was
Don?
gonna say Stephanie's got her hand up.
Yeah.
Stephanie,
Did you forget to take it down, Steph, or you got a comment?
Nope, I two comments. One would be a next step also might be you might have a group of people as like a subcommittee like this do this, but also this is a great project for a student also to just sort of prepare if you want like a GIS project to say, okay, look at all these lands or parcels that we have and identify them by these different criteria and tell us what the priorities might be in this, that, or the other. So it's kind of a nice project for them to use hands-on experience, but also get some free work that you can then start from and then have the committee kind of go from there. The other comment that I was going to make was I totally agree with Jen that it's, you have to do a little bit of everything in order to get there because we're definitely behind on affordable housing. But I keep hearing that everyone loves Sutton so much because of its character of having a lot of open space and having farmland, etc. And so there's always a balance a little bit of if you're taking your open space and converting it into housing, you're losing some of that natural open space that people are assuming will always be there. I feel like a lot of us have been through that time of you go back to where you grew up and you thought it was always going to be a forest and your favorite hiking trail, and then it's a development and you just didn't know it wasn't protected. So maybe just a sentence in there of, this needs to be balanced with maintaining, I feel like this one in particular, maintaining that sort of rural character of identifying the open space and what might be good for preservation and permanent protection, which is like the reason that everyone loves Sutton, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then also identifying what might be within an area that's already very developed and might be actually good for sustainable sort of
Yeah.
cluster high density.
actually, I would like to propose that as a separate section. And that is the next step, to evaluate for restriction and for conservation areas at least equal to the sizing that we intend to put in development. There's a number of communities that have put that into their MBA statute.
I mean, we have an open space plan.
Yeah, I know, but in conservation restriction, either in 61 or frankly dedication to a private foundation that will maintain it. So that you're literally making an affirmative step that this has to be balanced as we develop the town.
I like that.
Taunton, where I used to live, even though they're a city, they have restrictions. There is land that looks like Sutton, and there's land that looks like downtown Webster. But they put in the restrictions early so that way they could say, this is the only area you can build on, this is the only area that we can add to, and this area you can never build to. And it might be something that we need to think about here.
I will undertake to give you a
Yeah,
draft.
I like that, Don.
Discuss it, yeah.
And
So
that's part of why
restrictions
we like open space residential design and why we like cottage housing, because both of those look at having a density of housing, but also at the same time permanently preserving open space. So that gives you that balance. So I think that's like a little checkbox in those recommendations.
it's the importance of zoning,
Yeah,
Exactly what's on.
where it goes.
that's exactly right. Okay, I'll give that a
So
whack.
I would argue that it shouldn't be its own section because I don't want to try and replicate other municipal plans. But I just think in the particular section of talking about converting open space, it just might be worth it to have a sentence of balancing this, and while you're identifying open space opportunities, also consider what might be good for permanent conservation and what might be good for development.
Yeah, it might just be a simple paragraph or something like that explains that we could slip into this section that explains.
Which, yeah, let me see how can do it, maybe slip it in as a section, just because it will be the full pause that all the others are, and you
Or
can
we can have it, like-
evaluate it,
Yeah, why don't you send it over,
Yeah.
write like a paragraph on it, you can send it over to me, we can work on it.
massage it.
But,
Okay,
it could be a thing that kind of like, we'll figure it out.
No, it's a good idea.
housing plan, so
Yep.
you don't want a section on open space preservation,
Yep.
but you would reference, as I think Stephanie was talking about, how you balance. You
Yep.
need to
Yeah, it's a
balance
complete balance.
housing with open space preservation to keep that balance.
Did you want a thumbs up?
We should do a thumbs up on public property.
I guess the only, and maybe it's embedded in here, my only question I have is, would we keep it and own it and put it into the housing authority, or would we sell it?
That's a decision made at
Yeah.
the time.
Okay,
Yeah.
yep, good, I'm good, just curious.
Yep. I think advice you could have too is that if you are selling it is to a developer that's gonna maintain it indefinitely.
Yep.
That way they're not gonna run from the community. They're invested with us.
Where are we going now? Let's see.
The only other section is public partnership.
Where are you?
Wes, did we
Paige?
skip the other part of 2.2, the VCOD? Did we do that already last time?
I have to update that.
There's a small update that Jen needs to do to it. And that's why I jumped over it. I don't know, Jen, if you wanna explain any update to it,
Really?
if it, not really?
No. I've been focusing on what Christine and I have been doing and
Yeah,
not much
all
else.
the demographics. Is there much to update on it?
On the
No,
VCOD?
Yeah.
Not really,
Not really.
no.
I just noticed it mentioned CMRPC's recommendations are, so I just want to make sure
Yeah.
that that got fixed.
Yeah, no, I'll just update it, and frankly, in the process of updating it, I don't think it'll fall out, but I don't know. I'll update it and we'll have that conversation.
It raises a good question, though. What happens if we don't agree with the recommendations of CMPRC?
CMRPC is working for the town, and they make recommendations based on the input they've gotten from the town officials they're working with, the public input, and of course, letting you know what's out there and what's the latest in planning trends and what other towns are doing. There is zero authority in CMRPC. So you only take CMRPC's recommendations and repeat them if you agree with them. In this case, some of their recommendations were like, oh, yeah, it's worth us considering those. It's worth us bringing those forward and letting the public decide if they like them or don't like them. But CMRPC has zero authority. They're not a state permitting agency or anything. So they just make recommendations, and you like them or you don't.
Okay, because it's in here as though this is, next steps, and when I read it, I thought, VCD covers only a handful of parcels near the town center, but we've already kind of had several discussions at various meetings of what we want the town center to look at. West Sutton is also under consideration.
Yeah, so I'll update it and bring it
Yeah,
up to date, and then,
Yeah,
yeah. And those were CMRPC recommendations from 6 years ago.
Right,
And
which-
there are no
yeah,
real recommendations now.
there are none, okay.
No, and
That's
those
fine.
were really based on discussion at the time.
So those come out, okey-doke, yeah, or will be revised.
Okay. Then 3.2 is pursue partnership opportunities for multifamily and mixed-use development.
It feels like this should be combined with the section above because it talks again about mixed use, which we already talked about in 40R, 40S.
Which is not the only way to do it, of course, but that is the preferential way of doing it, I think.
Yeah, this here, Jerry, if you have any more to speak on this section, but it's kind of like, if you have the public property, you want to send it out to RFP, this is where you're going to have the best opportunity to work with the developers and be able to manage the scenario. So it kind of does work hand in hand with section 3.1 if you're driving the bus by being the landowner, sending it out to RFP and donating the land for that development.
Stephanie, were you talking about combining it with the section immediately above or with 40R, that section?
40R, 40S.
Okay, so 40R, 40S section was really just about whether you recommend use of that regulation. And then 3 is really kind of, it almost digs in a little, how would you use that? How would you do that? So 40R, 40S is implement the zoning. And then this section is, it almost digs in a little bit deeper. How can we, once we have the zoning in place, then how can we hop off that and get some stuff actually done, is how I'm reading this section. And one of the ways we can actually get it done is by partnering.
That's the key point here, is partnering with the right developer, the right management company, whatever it might be. If the town should go ahead and put out an RFP for developing town-owned land, the recommendation has to go along with it. So this could just kind of move up and be a subsection of this,
Like
of
a
the other
next,
part.
like a next step?
Yeah,
Okay, all right.
Yeah, that's sort of what
Like
I
a
was.
next step instead, okay.
because that is key. We should not be recommending that the town look at developing town-owned land without interviewing and finding the right developer. Because
The
that
tag
is
it right
key.
with it.
Well,
Yep.
yeah, I mean,
I think this would include the select board too. So you have planning director, housing working group, and CMRPC, but I would think that
you're gonna
this would
scrap
have to go through the select board.
CMRPC.
Yeah.
Same thing, scrap CMRPC and stick
Scrap
in
CMR.
select board.
Would that whole section, that whole responsible parties get nixed out of it because we might pull part of
Yeah,
this
pull it into
paragraph
next
and go up
step.
to 40R, 40S?
Yep.
Part of this paragraph might go up to public property because that's, you're gonna be working with a
It won't
developer.
become a
It
subsection
won't
of
become
that,
a
or?
subsection. It'll become like, some of this recommendation is, if we're gonna go for public property, we need to put out the RFP and work with a good developer that's gonna work with us for the next 30 years. You're gonna maintain that building, not just buy it and flip it, or build it and flip it. And the same thing with the 40R, 40S, we wanna work with a good developer, who's owner, who's gonna do that. So we kind of rework the paragraph, put it underneath those two.
Right, and then I just have a little, I always revert to this, but in the first sentence, you're talking about proximity, areas and proximate to transportation and services. I think we have to also include our infrastructure. I think a lot of the survey information we got from the last 2 surveys, the town is supportive of more dense development, but where there's public water and sewer. It's just, it's what the people are saying. So I don't know if that's important here. And then I had one comment on the 3.0, the summary paragraph at the top of this section as well.
All right.
So in the last sentence of the 3.0, where it says the town should explore the availability of state subsidy programs such as Friendly 40B, this is from 2019. So the select board it did complete a memorandum of understanding for a LIP with the Armsby one and was in the process with Elite Home Builders. Both of those developers pulled out because of the lack of their availability to infrastructure, water, and sewer. So should we change that to say that, to recognize that the town, unlike other communities, this select board has shown its willingness to work with developers with a LIP in order to partner for the project design, so.
We can, and I think this whole thing is gonna get rewritten anyways, so some of this is gonna get just pulled out.
Okay.
We could rewrite it, kinda like what you're talking about there, and then we can
But-
make it dedicated for each section.
Right, so this is a update to one that's expired, and I think if we include that, it also shows that the town has been willing to work. So it shows, even though we didn't make great strides, as Stephanie said, towards the prior plan, it does show that the community and the select board are willing to be in agreement for LIPs, and they've shown that in the past. It could be supportive towards getting acceptance by the state for this particular draft, or.
Hey, Kristen, you
think it-
touched on one key thing when you said, I think, to paraphrase, I think you said, we haven't made great progress, or something along those lines. I think the important thing is, who's the we? The we has to be the market forces, right? Like, the town's not actually doing stuff. I mean, if I take a step back and look at who actually has to invest the money and do the building and take the risk, it's
The
developers, not,
Well, the actual building, but you have to lay the groundwork.
Oh, sure.
If you don't have the right bylaws and you don't have. know that.
granted, but the actual investment capital,
Yeah.
generally speaking, comes from
Absolutely.
for-profit investors, and we're in a
Absolutely.
dicey time period in the market.
And I mean, the fact that the select board was supportive of 240 apartments, was it? Or they reduced it a little for Armsby, and they signed the LIP, and they had the presentation by KP Law, and they decided to move forward and be a partner, and then the developer pulled out. That, again, that had nothing to do with us. We're saying we're willing to work with you.
But that just goes to finding the right developer, again, and finding that right partnership. So, I mean, it's what it is. There's gonna be some that are gonna pull out because it's not there. And there's gonna be others who are say, okay, let's think outside the box. This infrastructure may not be there the way we would like it to be, but how else can we get this infrastructure done? So it's just about partnership.
Stephanie, you have a question?
Project
Or hands
economics.
up?
Yeah, project economics, I'm going to agree with you and Norman, yeah, as being the fiscal people, sorry.
Steph?
So I know we haven't gone through the beginning first like 50 pages, but I think as part of the transition between the background, or maybe it's the very, very beginning actually, it would be helpful to have sort of a what's happened since our last plan. And I think mentioning things like that are really helpful to say, yeah, we have done something, right? I think it's always good to give yourself credit when you've done things, but also be honest about what hasn't been done. And I would argue that it's not just developers, there's a lot of things in here. I mean, you can see every single responsible party, it often says the planning board or the planning director, et cetera. So CPA and the housing trust and the bylaws or 40R, 40S, all of those things, cottage housing, all of that is within the town's control, not for developers necessarily.
Right, but just because we put it in the bylaw doesn't mean anybody's showing up to do it.
No, but if it's not in the bylaw and they see it's not in the bylaw, they'll go to the town that has it in the bylaw.
But nobody's, we're going back to this. I think, Wes, you pointed out, cottage housing, the individual standalone units are not inexpensive to build. And the reference we made in here to the one in Dennisport, I think we should find a different example. The Dennisport property is a seasonal one. It's seasonal rental. So we should find one that's year-round, that has affordability, and the Dennisport one isn't that. So we should look
I
for a
think it'd
different
be 6
example.
or 7.
Have you looked at the one at Lancaster that just is gonna come online? MCO cottages, 32 units,
No, so we
affordable.
don't have to fill
I
this
would,
out.
Jen, it's,
I already got.
well, let's look at
this
it together.
updated for some of it, the references.
All right,
It's close by.
now what?
No, well, we've gone through all those recommendations, done?
I was gonna say, with the 2.1
Yep.
inclusionary housing, last week we talked about, is there any towns nearby?
Yep.
I did research it, and we could include something in there. Charlton has inclusionary housing, Douglas has inclusionary housing, and Northbridge. which are-
Grafton does, but in particular zones, too.
Right.
Yeah, I think Christine got the number right last week. It was like 150, right, Christine?
150 communities in the state have inclusionary zoning. Of the 150 communities, 6% have community-wide. The majority of them pick areas that have the proper infrastructure to handle the density. So, I mean, I think that's what we were discussing last week, whether we need to be community-wide or not. Personally, I'm a supporter of infrastructure. I think, as Jen pointed out, we had a conversation about the Burbank Woods, and one of the issues with that is the septic systems and the nitrogen area that they need to have, right, Jen? And so they have to have a certain amount of property for that. And as an abutter, I'm sure, you're concerned with all those septic systems.
Yeah.
That gets mitigated when you stay to where there's proper infrastructure.
That's why Douglas might be the good one to point out, because they're very similar to us.
Yeah.
And was theirs community-wide?
No, theirs is,
Zone, and so is Grafton's. Grafton's is the MBTA overlay in the Fisherville section of town.
Christine, when you got the 6%, what was your source for that?
Can I get back?
Yes, please.
I wake up at 3 in the morning and I send myself emails from different resources, so I can find it. It's just in the litany of emails to myself.
That would be good.
Would you be able to add
Sorry.
2 or 3 sentences that just drills right down on that said, inclusionary zoning may be most successful in Sutton in those areas where the infrastructure is already existing and permits a cost-efficient development of the property adjacent to the infrastructure.
I don't know that I'd go there, because again, that's up to the voters to decide what they want, but we can give the stats.
But if you don't say that you can actually restrict it, that you say, if you
Yeah,
don't give
but-
the example of Douglas and say, but you can
No,
restrict
well, you're giving,
inclusionary.
if you give the stats and you say 150 communities, and you, again, that's why I asked Christine where she got the percentage.
Yeah.
Because that seems super low, just from talking to a lot of planners. But again, I might be wrong.
I will forward you the
So,
email I sent to my.
Yes.
let's get that
Then we
information,
can
'cause-
just give the stats, and the facts are what the facts are. And then at least the voters have the facts and can make their own decision.
So
And just
the-
quickly, Dawn,
what
did you say
fact would they
Northbridge?
have?
The fact would be 150 communities have adopted it, but X% have restricted it to areas that have higher
That's
density
the
or
sentence
water
I
and
want in
sewer
there.
or whatever.
That's it.
Yeah,
That's
so you
just
just have
nails
the
it.
facts,
Okay.
and then you go from
And
there.
it was the 6% is community-wide, yeah.
Yeah.
Just,
That'll do it. Thank you.
Yeah, and Christine, I just looked at it. Charlton, Northbridge, and Douglas all restricted
yeah,
certain
yeah,
zones.
they are. It's very rare to have it community-wide, yeah.
Great.
Can I just jump in for a second and address a previous comment on cottage housing,
Go on.
which apparently has become my baby? So another example that's more local and might be of interest is Cottages on Green. It's in East Greenwich, Rhode Island. It's a little weird because usually when you talk about cottage housing and likely within Sutton, when we talk about cottage housing, there would be a larger area of open space as part of it. This was a 0.85 acre lot and 15 units. So it's high density, very small. And it
Lovely.
also has.
And did it have public and sewer, public water and sewer?
That one probably
Yes, it
does.
does.
It likely did.
Yeah.
And I don't want to belabor that point. That is a separate point. I think that we've made the one comment of what has public water and sewer is incredibly built up. So we're kind of being pushed a little bit into the other option, which I understand is more expensive, but is what we have. And also, we're not discounting the fact that there might be different utilities into the future. This is a very long-term plan.
But I think we have to.
Regardless of that, can I just give you this example?
Yes?
So it was, it's a mixed income. They're condos. They're not, I think they are usually condos. And they're a mix of single, double, and duplex and triplex. So they're a little bit different in that regard too. But I think it's an interesting example. It won a ton of awards. It's a well-known one, and it's, relatively local.
And I think that was Union Studios that did that one too, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that was the one where the day I showed up to tour it and photograph it, that the old lady was sitting on our porch and the young man came out on the cottage across, and before he went to work, he stopped and he said, Mrs. Whatever, I'm about to go grab a coffee before I go to work. Can I help you with anything? And it was like the ideal of what you want cottage communities for, one of the huge.
What was the price range?
Oh, I don't know.
Currently, they have a 2-bedroom, 1,000 square foot unit up for sale, $480,000,
So $480 a square foot?
basically. And it's a duplex.
480.
So they're it's in a duplex, so they're only selling one unit in that duplex.
Yep.
For that amount.
And it's got like a garden down the front and a community garden down the end. It's super cute. And it's just funny because when you're standing in the
But-
middle of it, you don't realize you're on you're on kind of a more, I won't say urban, but it's pretty
It's pretty,
urbanite-ish.
but again, I mean, $480,000
Was that one of the?
in Rhode Island, you could go buy a single
Might
family
be, I have
home
to
for
double
that.
check.
Not up here.
No,
No,
not in
not
Rhode
up here,
Island.
but I'm saying this is Rhode Island, it's $480,000.
But it's in Greenwich, you're not
to
far from the
say-
water, right? So just one comment to Stephanie. So the unified residential parcel, Jen, is that 130 acres?
Roughly.
And that has public water and sewer accessibility if the district was able to get more draw from the DEP.
Yep.
So we still do have a lot of available land for this type of housing and these type of cottage developments, which according to the survey that we just did last year, and those were some of the MBTA parcels that the community was very amenable to cottage housing on those parcels. So you could put a significant amount of units in that area with public infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is this is a recommendation to consider cottages. The community will decide if and when the bylaw ever gets written and ever goes to town meeting, where they would like it to go. So, and, I have the results from the last public, which will replicate it, this one, I hope. on where people thought different housing could go, and people placed cottages all over Sutton.
In the 2024, you only were looking at the 5 overlay
No,
parcels.
this was from the last HPP, and we're gonna replicate the same, I hope, we're going to replicate the same activity at our public sessions this time around. So you get people have an actual visual of their town, an actual visual of different types of housing, and they place them where they think they would.
So where did they put the multifamily housing?
The multifamily housing was largely along 146.
And where were the apartment style?
Town center was pocket neighborhood, cottage community, small-scale mixed-use townhouses with design standards.
Right.
Minden Road North was pocket neighborhood, cottage community. Manchog was small-scale mixed-use, cottage community, 4 units with design standards, small-scale condominiums, and pocket neighborhood. Along Route 146 was 4 units with design standards and large-scale mixed-use. Northwest Industrial District was large-scale apartments, large-scale mixed-use, townhouse-style apartments, townhouses with design standards, cottage community and pocket neighborhoods. West Commercial Industrial District was townhouses with design standards, cottage community and pocket neighborhoods. Southwest Industrial was small-scale condominiums, pocket neighborhood, cottage community and townhouses with design standards. And southwest of Central Turnpike was townhouse-style apartments, pocket neighborhood, and cottage community.
Right, so cottage houses are single-family units. So the overlying thing that you can summarize from that is they chose.
No, cottage community was, they had the image of an actual cottage community, and it was explained to them what a cottage community was. A cottage community is not a single-family home. It's not a small single-family home. It is shorter, it is smaller in mass. and
Is it
has-
attached to another unit?
It
Are there
is
2
not
dwelling
attached
units? So
to
it's
another.
one dwelling unit,
It's one dwelling unit, but entirely different than any other type of single-family home.
not in Manchog. It's
you
the
can
same.
have-
We go back to this all the time.
You and I are going, and you'll see. I'm gonna
I
take you
go
to one.
there, I live there.
No, I'm gonna take you to a cottage community, and you'll see how they are entirely different than the village of Manchog. A small home that's cute and quaint is not a cottage community. It's not.
Can we just find a location where we have the ideal cottage community? And
Yes.
just go visit it?
Please.
That way we don't debate on it?
Several.
Okay.
Let's go visit several.
We have a field trip.
Yeah, I didn't mean to bring up the whole like big picture necessarily. There just was a question about a local example, and so
Yep.
I wanted to identify that local example that might be one. And that one isn't just single. That one also, like I said, is duplexes and triplexes.
Yeah, yeah. There's some gorgeous ones out there, and I'd love for people to see them
Cottages
and
on
understand.
Greenwich was the name of that?
Yes.
Look up.
We'll make a list, and
Okay,
we're gonna haul some people out there. It'll be good.
so that should be on a to-do list.
To do. Yeah.
Okay,
Okay. All right, what else we got?
well, that's for the review of the recommendations.
All right,
So next is gonna be to get the actual demographic, all those sections
Mm-hmm.
updated, which I know you've been working on, Christine, you've been working on a
Yeah.
lot over the last
quick-
couple weeks. And then once we get that, we could update inside here and get another draft, a final draft out to everybody to review, based on all these thumbs up.
excellent. So, yeah, so I'm working and asking when necessary to CMRPC to some of the sections in the executive summary, the background sections, the introduction section, the Town of Sutton overview, other than the sections that Christine and I have pulled apart, met an hour and a half on that the other day. So those I hope to do over the weekend, because why wouldn't you do that on the
I
weekend?
reviewed the whole.
The housing market, I'm updating regulatory constraints, that whole housing challenges section. But there are 3 sections that Wes, I know, has drafted, and they are summary of housing production goals, summary of housing strategies, and housing production goals. Those 3 sections are the ones that after we have the public inputs and the survey inputs, then we'll make the final adjustments to the plan, and that's when it goes to the plan. After that, it goes to the planning board, the board of selectmen, and to the state. So, but I know Wes has already kind of got the draft on those, which is beautiful, and then we can just update it and tweak it as we see the actual results from the public input. So,
Get any appendices or attachments together.
yep, So I just didn't know if anybody thought there was, again, remembering this is a housing production plan, how are we going to meet our 40B requirements, and are there other key housing things, subjects? Is there anything missing?
Yes.
Yes.
I do have a note on here that there should be a section or a reference, more than a reference, to housing needs for 80 to 120% AMI households,
Yep.
because that gap is ever widening. So I do have that. What else?
Do we have enough in there regarding the housing authority?
No.
Okay, and then secondly, now I reviewed this all like a couple weeks ago, so I have to refresh my memory, but when I did just to find the wording, we focus on bedroom count. I think it's important to also put in there that the town of Sutton has an inventory of units, whatever it's a 3,612, 3,542, whatever it is, broken down by square footage. So 40% of the units in town are under 1,800 square feet. And then we have nothing really in there about longevity. So one of the things that makes Sutton amenable to many people is they come here and they stay here forever. And I can say that from personal experience. You know, my mother said she's going out of the house, in a box. So I think there's a lot of people in town that feel that way. Jim's mother, same way. So that's impactful for the vacancy rates and the number of units we have on the market, is the fact that such a large percentage of people come here and stay here and invest in their homes. But we do have a large inventory of homes that are what you would consider starter size. It's just that the people aren't leaving them. And they will be leaving them because they're just aging. That's the boomers.
Unfortunately, they'll leave them, and even if they're 1,200 square feet, they're gonna be $500,000. So that's the problem, so.
Which is the market. I mean,
It is the
to some
market.
extent. I mean,
It is the market. It is the market, but,
I would also argue that starter homes are typically smaller than 1,800 square feet.
yeah.
Google says between 750 and 1,250, generally under 1,400.
So we have those numbers as well. I have the whole spreadsheet from the assessors. I can put any benchmark and data sort that for whatever benchmarks you want.
I got you on that. So what's happened since 2019, kind of add that in the language. Talk a little bit more about the housing authority, and comments or whatever on the 80 to 120% AMI that's not being served. And we can add into our housing data some square footage information along with the other information we have.
So
Okay.
through the chair.
Andrea, yep.
I'm looking at page 46 on community infrastructure, where it says water and sewer and then highways and transit. One of the things that came out in the Telegram article when Ed Augustus was in Worcester last week was they're now actually starting to pursue questions on the cost to the taxpayers of the growth. How much is it actually going to potentially cost now and in the future to expand the infrastructure, to build the roads, to put the sewers in, to expand the schools? Several towns, including Lexington, have done a study on a per capita basis as to how much it will cost to add students to the schools. So what can we add that will help people understand that all of these recommendations come at a cost to the existing folks that live here and to the folks that will buy here? If we need to
Bill?
develop it, I'm happy to start. I'll write that along with the other one. But I think that we, really need to, we can't just say this is all magically going to pay for itself, because we know who's going to pay for it.
Well, first off,
But I guess my question here is, does that need to be in this? These are just suggestions on how to create.
Well, I had a very engaged discussion with one of the members of this committee. And the word production means that you create something, and production means cost plus value equals goodness. We are producing something. To produce something comes at a cost.
right.
So I think we have to have we can't ignore it.
Well-
We're just gonna not pretend it's all gonna be free?
Yeah.
Our
no.
taxes aren't gonna go up, the schools aren't
But
gonna.
I think when the individual projects come forward is when the costs will be discussed with.
Well, in water and sewer, we have, my 26 years here, We don't pay for any water or sewer. You want to develop it, you're paying for water and sewer. You're not only paying for the lines, if our system needs pump upgrades, you're paying for the pump upgrades, blah, blah, blah. And then it's the people who are on the system who pay the rates. The people who are on the system don't generally, so it's not town-wide water and sewer expansion. Highways, absolutely. You add traffic to the roadways.
Schools.
There's going to be a
Yeah.
cost. But there's a flip cost of not housing people too, not having people in your community to serve the businesses that are in your community. Jim and I had this conversation with a biotech startup guy this week, that it's a huge consideration of companies looking to locate if you don't have the housing to support and house their employees. So we can talk cost, but there's costs and impacts on both sides. So I think we should be clear in the water and sewer section that the policy of the town to date is that cost is on developers. But there is definitely always things to think about in terms of highway and transit and increased costs there. We work really
Yeah, I
hard.
think, can we put like a separate, just a section that say, the cost considerations on growth, or growth and costs, how we intend to balance those in the future, so that it's really, Jen, I mean, frankly, I'm in the Wilkinson Water District. We got assessed for the improvement of the system, right? Peanuts, but you and I agree on some of the issues. But it hasn't been 100% passed on to the developers.
Yeah, but you're
So-
using that water and sewer too, so you get a benefit.
But should we put in there the impact that we've gotten grants? We've provided
Well,
gas
that's the
to
other piece.
Atlas
There's a
and
lot of
Gilmore. and
grant
we've
agencies
done
that will
improvements
provide
to help the
funds.
Unified project
Yeah.
through grant funding, that if we don't comply with MBTA, that $3.6 million grant for the sewer upgrade would have been taken off the table, at which point would then Unified had to pay to move that pump station, or was that not
Once-
related to them?
Once the contract is signed, they can't yank
Yank
it
it.
back. Yeah, so,
Well,
yeah, if you keep the same, they can't yank it back once the contract's
Yeah,
signed.
But,
I'm
but we've gone
concerned,
out and
yeah.
chased grant money to make it amenable for commercial to come here, so the developers didn't have to use all their dime. So we partnered with
That
the developer.
3.6 million, we did not do for Unified. We had a huge issue.
But
with
Gilmore
sewer.
Drive and Atlas, we did get grant money that was to the benefit of those companies
It was to the
coming in.
benefit of them, but it was done primarily for the benefit of the community in South Sutton. It was done because we had an empty 114-acre industrial parcel, and the only way you get somebody there is to make some infrastructure improvements. You don't get companies with no infrastructure. So we were doing the build it and they will come to the place that's been zoned industrial for 20 years and nothing's there. So no, we used, that's the reality of it, we used the fact that Unified was planning some expansion to be able to tap into money that we otherwise couldn't have got to solve a problem we already had. and we
Right, because
had
that
to
grant,
solve.
you had to be tied to a
It
commercial
had to
project.
be tied to
Right.
economic development.
Right.
Or housing creation.
So-
And housing creation wasn't on the table.
Instead
all-
of writing
all-
a section on this,
Yeah.
we're gonna have like appendices or attachments to the report. And you've already gone through and done a assessment of impacts, like on different ranges of how you did the calculations on just building 181 units of residential multifamily using different assumptions. And we have to show what the assumptions are that went into calculation to show what the cost impacts are of the town. And that calculation could be scaled up or down based on difference. And we could just have that as an attachment
Yeah.
to the report that could be audited, we'll say, right? And you could point to that and say, well, here's an example of a cost of a development. You could go read the appendix.
Actually, let me give you a couple
As long as
sentences
you
in
do
a
the other
section.
side of that, because we talked and had comments on, I don't want benefits unless we have negatives. You want to show cost, I would love to see the cost of not doing stuff too. So, two sides to every
Yeah,
coin.
let me give it a try, because we already have one sentence in the water and sewer which says the cost of making these changes is significant, right? Expanses of the services would be a costly process. But we really haven't given any consideration to actually, to Jen's point, the benefits of growth, the detriments of not growing. But we all know that they are going to come with a cost. So I think to balance it out in the infrastructure section, let me give it a try, and then you can see, you don't like it, we don't put it in.
Okay?
Wouldn't be the first time my drafting has been rejected.
Yeah, but it was really good.
Sorry. Of course, it doesn't happen often. Really.
So Wes, you're gonna do, so you're gonna pull together all of the sections as mainly
Further updates.
me, Christine, the few, Andrea, pull them together. The next 2 weeks are really public sessions. Postcards were delivered to Manchog today in person. So you know, Christine, because we wanted to make sure those got out in a timely manner, we had those printed at Staples. So sorry, they're not as good as the other ones. So they look okay, but they always mess up like the cutting.
How come they had to be printed separately?
I don't, I have to ask Emily, but the edge cutting's weird on them. But they're, I mean, they're the same
No,
exact.
no offense, I'm a Manchog girl by heart. Of course, those are the ones that are a little bit different.
So the rest of the towns probably won't go out until tomorrow, but we got Manchogs out hand delivered today. The rest of the towns will go out tomorrow. Pam has busted her butt. If you have not been on your website in the last 48 hours, the amount of information, the amount of organization, the amount of public, the stuff public can tap into about what you're doing and what you've considered is huge. Take a look at it, and then you can call her and send her flowers or whatever. And then nothing worth more than $50, please, though. And so the next 2 weeks are public sessions. We'll be starting to roll in the responses to the survey. Make sure you reach out to your networks and let people know there's a survey out there and to make sure they take it. If you have people that want a hard copy of the survey, let me know. I can get you some paper copies for them. I'm gonna deliver some to the senior center. There'll be some at the library and some in the town clerk's office. All right, so there'll be paper copies of those. Those come back to me, and they go back to CMRPC for manual entry and tabulation. So, and then, do we have a date picked for after that to come back together?
So we have the next, basically
Just
with
go
a
over this
presentation
again.
on Thursday, the 29th, 7 PM here at the town hall. Then Tuesday, the 3rd at 9 AM at the senior center. And then Monday, the 9th at 7 PM, Luke did confirm that Blackstone Hall is good and ready for us, so
Monday, June 9th.
Pam will coordinate
Yes.
them like the week before. So we're good for those 3 dates for the presentations and discussions with the community.
How many would you expect?
Last time around, it was like, the one at the town hall is usually the better attended one, because it just is. But Blackston is always rivals the town hall. I mean, I feel like there's 30 people usually at Blackston Hall. The senior center coffee hour is relatively new, so, but there is food. So I had a coffee hour meeting with them on a different subject 2 weeks ago, and I got like 7 people, but it was a boring subject. So I think this is more interesting. So I'm thinking probably around 30 at Blackstone. I'd say probably 30 here, if not more,
Okay.
here.
Jim,
So-
would you mind if I handed that out? That was your explanations of,
I think we have to talk about that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think-
which particular one are you talking about, Brian? I
it was
said-
your explanations of all the,
Yeah, I
all
mean,
the
I'd
40A,
really like to-
40B,
I'd really
the
like to talk about
definitions.
that.
Yeah,
I'm actually doing a fact sheet on each of those in advance of the public meetings. It's just the facts. It doesn't include kind of
which is how I started that. but-
Jim's, you
Yeah,
know,
this is a nice breakdown of the whole
Yeah.
thing. If you
Could
don't
give us
mind,
a
I'll,
comment on this? Could you walk us through
I would love to. We'd ever, I'm sorry?
Can you do that?
Ca-
At the meeting, at this meeting? No? Yes?
I don't,
not on the agenda. I would not.
it relates to the HPP, but it's, I mean, two comments I'd make right now. I've been getting a lot of questions from people, and maybe it's because I've been talking about this more, about, well, first of all, I've had to assure people I am not a communist. I've had more people call me a communist or a socialist for wanting to have affordable housing, but I've had to explain to people we're doing this for a reason, and one of which is to have 40B compliance for, to ensure our zoning laws. So I think part of this is a lot of people in the community don't know why we're doing the things we're doing. And so I think there's just this big context setting for people. Here's why we're doing it. And that's one of the things I wanted to, the other phrase I often use is, what are we solving for, right? And I always say, I'm not solving for some unknown people in Boston or California or the Midwest. Like, I'm solving for the needs of Sutton is the way I think about it. But that's just one of these guiding principles I think we got to lock down on.
So you wouldn't mind if I printed up 30 of these?
No, she would.
You would?
Yeah, I
It's-
mean, there's a lot of factual. He's got
I
a
think
lot
it'd be
of,
clear what exactly that is. I think, Brian, are you talking about the front part of it or the part with all the, sort of?
Just your definitions of the
Yeah,
different.
there's a front part which is definitional.
so, Brian, so you know, I've already produced, and I'm just cleaning them up now, a visual, very graphic, easy to understand fact sheet for 40A, for 40B.
Oh, you got something already?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So that will have stacks at the sessions if people want that.
Right.
So they have it just nice and clear in front of
Right.
them. The tail end of that document is Jim's approach to that, which I think we want to be careful handing that out as something HPP
Okay,
related.
I'm glad I
because,
asked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know,
Okay.
I tried to
there's
think
some
through
good
how to get to the
ideas.
300.
Personally, I think there's some good ideas there. I think there's some ideas there that need to be vetted or understood a little bit more. But that's really kind of Jim's position as opposed to the HPPs.
Yeah, I mean,
She's already got it, yeah.
But everybody should have the fact sheets.
Yeah.
Like the information that Jim provides up front, just really clear. And that's what we tried to do. And I think you'll like the sheets,
Okay.
and I'll get them to you.
Jen, do you just start with the basic concept that it was a change in the law made by the state that required the towns to be partners in the solution? I mean, that's MBTA, right? That's 40A, adjacent small town.
Well, it's 40, yeah, I mean, 40A is, I mean, 40B is a little more in-depth than that, having sprung from the Civil Rights Act
Right.
and the fair
But
housing.
But I guess my point is that a lot of people say, well, why are we doing this? And the
Yeah. No, I think
simple
that's-
fundamental point is,
No, I
it's in
actually.
the statute.
Back in
you know.
again.
No, but I like the way you said it. That requires the town to be
It-
part of this, certain towns to be part of the solution.
The solution, because we got it pushed on, I would say we might have gotten it pushed on us a bit, but there we are. We have no choice.
But isn't the HPP, because it gets filed with E EOHLC, really related to 40B compliance and affordability?
HPP, the only reason for the HPP
Is for
is compliance
with 40B.
with 40B.
Yeah.
Again, we've taken it a little broader than that, which I think is phenomenal, and you have this opportunity. You're talking about housing. There's zero reason why you wouldn't be more broad and look at things like
Right,
MBTA
so if we
and
go
other
back
housing
to what
laws.
Jim's talking about, this whole process is basically, the problem we're solving for is 40B compliance and the method to stay in safe harbor as we approach our 10%.
Right.
So 10% puts you in a safe harbor, having an on-file HPP and making a certain defined progress as defined by you, puts you in safe harbor.
Right.
That's the only reason we have an HPP.
Right. That's it.
40A was a different
Exactly.
animal.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you at
No,
all. And the phraseology, the problem is the messaging, because it's hard to get people to understand that you are trying to do what you are required by law to do in line with your desire to keep Sutton Sutton. So effectively, right, what we're really saying is, we want to comply with the law, and then effectively almost do it to a minimalist approach, and you're again afraid to use the word, right? But to
Thoughtful compliance.
A thoughtful compliance,
Right.
which balances a smaller amount, which yields the greatest impact for the
Right,
town.
and I think that goes back, so I'm going to assume you had a really busy week, I know you did, but one of the open items is whether or not, I believe, 40R only requires 20% affordability, not 25%, and it's still, but there was supposed to be a verification that a 40R rental property would have 100% of the units go towards the SHI.
They already
25%.
verified that.
You've-
Just not the
No,
percentage.
I think 40R only requires you to do 20% affordability
But I think for 100% of the count, I think you have to have 25%
5%.
affordable.
Yes.
for the affordability. Okay, so we need to add that in somewhere. So a 40R can have 20%, but if it has 20% in its rental, then only the 20% of the units count as
RER can
SHI.
be 100% affordable. There's,
Make it what
So
we
it's
want.
25% plus to get 100% to the SHI,
That's under-
And they have to be a rental.
right?
Yeah.
yes.
Okay,
So
so,
the minimum is 25.
So
but you
for
can do
whatever-
whatever you
Tell you
want.
what,
For whatever developer we're negotiating with or working with, partnering with, whatever phrase we want to use, that's a key negotiating point. What we don't want to do is have it just go to be sold and then not, you
and
know,
the key negotiating point with that further is it's a mix of AMIs.
Yeah.
So you have a certain number that is 30%, a certain number that is 50%, a certain number that is 80%.
I don't think you have
AMIs.
to go as low as 30%, do
You
you?
don't have to.
You don't have to,
You don't.
but we should.
Well, Jen's pointed out previously that without public transportation, we can't go to 30% because someone at that income level can't live in this town without public transportation. They can't afford a car and their rent and their other expenses. It's just outside of the scope of
So I
that
think
income level.
We're getting into what the minor details of
Right, no, but
bylaw.
that's, we've been at
recommending the bylaw.
presentations.
Yeah.
Though I did see something that I'd love to talk to you about, because I did see some flexibility to go over 80% too. To
Yes.
maybe touch the 80 to 120% NEMI,
Yes, there
which
is.
is a widening gap, which would be good. Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, we go to the 30 if it works, but I'm not,
Pam?
Christine's,
Oh.
I think that's iffy, but.
I'm going to borrow Christine's famous question. How many communities have 40R? Like, do we have an example of that, how we want?
I don't know the number.
Oh, well, somebody could,
Communities,
communities.
yep,
And like one, like how we all want a local example, just like something that
yeah.
we could
Yeah,
look
you
at.
mean a local example of a project or a local example of the bylaw?
Or
Both,
towns
Both,
that
but
have them,
towns that have it.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
okey-doke, yeah.
and a project
How
wouldn't be a
many?
bad thing either.
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay.
So, do we have a date for next meeting?
We don't. We have the three meetings are town presentations that we have coming up. We need to get the actual, when do we think we're gonna get the actual sections of the report?
You know, by the time the public meetings are over.
Well, we need to get it before, so we can send it out to everybody to review, so then we can schedule another meeting, so we're not here to the end of June.
Actually, we'll talk on that, but, for everybody here to review. I don't think we actually have to have a dedicated, once we've reviewed the final draft, after the public input, and the committee has reviewed the final draft, and the committee has reviewed the final draft, you're gonna post it up to your site. We're gonna schedule with the planning board and the Board of Selectmen. And during our processes, during our public conversations, thank you, total blank there. You'll be telling people next steps. So letting them know, we're gonna integrate this, here's the timing, and then that draft's gonna be posted up there. So if you wanna review the final draft, make sure you take a look for it. So we're not gonna do another public notification and necessarily another pure public meeting separate for review of just the draft. We'll let people know it's out there, they can submit comments, and you're gonna have a public meeting in front of the planning board where you basically go over the framework and the basics of what the plan is, and the public can be giving comments at those meetings and again at the Board of Selectmen. And then you're just wrapping up any odds and ends that come out of those meetings, which hopefully will be little or none, and then you're done. So I don't think there needs to be another public notification in a separate meeting for the public to just comment on that draft.
Your handout is ready, Jen?
One of them is, one of them's not, so let me
And
get
you'll
those.
send it to us?
Yeah, the 40A, 40B, and 40A, 40B, and I have one more.
Yeah, the handout for the next Thursday's meeting, town hall meeting. You got a handout?
Oh, yeah, yes,
You'll send that to us? Okay.
that's next Thursday, right? Yeah.
So
But
if
I'll-
we have one more meeting to review the final plan, and then it's gonna be submitted to the planning board and select board.
Mhm.
And then get it approved.
And we're done.
Yep. So do we have availability for our, some different times that's available?
So, comment, if we have to wait for the public hearings to get any comments to implement that into the draft, then those changes will have to be made, then that draft will have to come out to us. So isn't there 2 more drafts that necessarily? So we've got this one that you're making the changes to, then we're gonna have 3 public hearings,
Yep.
then we might have more changes, at which point we can't talk about the draft unless we're in an open meeting.
So any updates or any comments coming back from the public would be into this next draft coming up?
Yeah, so,
We're not gonna go back and keep on updating drafts.
yeah, so you've got a draft, you'll have a draft
Yep,
soon.
yep, we have a draft.
And none of us will talk about it with one another. We'll all look at it and we'll hold our comments till after the public hearing, till after Wes decides to put any public comments in, then we'll read that whole new draft. Again, not talk to anybody, then we'll come together. Then if we don't thumbs up or thumbs down or vote for what the changes are, then I guess he'll make them live and then we'll vote at that moment and then the text will be the final text?
I mean, the ideal would be to have one more meeting. So you've got a draft, he can post up the draft. If you have comments, send them to Wes on that draft. If you have comments on that draft, send them to Wes only. Well, and you can CC me too, because I'm adjusting some of the sections. But, and then we're gonna go into the public meetings, and then there's gonna be input from the public meetings. And then we'll make changes or adjustments based on what happened in the public meetings, if any, you know? The main thing will be kind of the appendices and working in things we found out in the survey where you see them now in the existing plan. You'll see the public survey showed this and that. So you're putting those into the plan. And then he'll let you know that that updated draft is out there. Take a look at it and come into the meeting. So you'll probably have to have a few days
After that last
after
meeting.
that. Oh, after the last meeting
meeting.
and after you send that draft.
After the
So-
the 9th.
So can I ask, for the many people on the board who work full-time, is it preferable for you to receive a draft on a Thursday to have Friday, Saturday, Sunday? I know some of these drafts are coming out on a Tuesday for a Thursday meeting. People work full-time, they have soccer. How do we want to time this so that we make sure that everybody actually has time to read the 80 pages?
Yeah, and sometimes I'm getting the actual updates
Oh, I know.
a couple hours
I know,
before
so,
doing
I mean,
this,
we need to
and-
make sure that we're planning it so that we are not all just nodding, we've actually read it, but we've all actually been able to sit on the deck in the sun with, and
Or
go
the
through
rain.
it, or the rain, or whatever, or get up early on a
Fix us.
Sunday before the paper and actually
So
read
if the
through it.
last thing's on the 9th, I know you're gonna hate me, Wes, but everybody's gonna hate me. But I would give it at least a week, if not 10 days after the 9th, to work in those changes. Because again, CMRPC is gonna has to pull together all of the survey data.
What
We
is
have
the
to-
survey deadline date for submission?
Is the what? Yeah, so the survey's not even closed until the 15th. So the last meeting's the 9th, the survey's not closed until the
And
15th.
CMRPC
So the
needs at
good
least a
news
week?
is, huh?
They need a week to compile the data? How long do they need
I'd
once the survey
say a week
closes?
to 10 days, probably. Because when they compile the data, they don't just compile the data, they do the graphs and stuff too. So it comes out in a visual form. So I'd say you need a week to 10 days after the 15th. The good news is you have between the 9th and the 15th to kind of put together things that came out of the public meeting, to kind of gather those, and we didn't talk about activities. So you'll kind of have a gist of some commentary from those public meetings. And then you'll have the survey, I'd say a week to 10 days for them to put that together. And then you're gonna need I'd say a week at least to integrate that into the plan, don't you think?
It's gonna be fast.
Yeah,
Gotta be fast.
Gotta be fast, yep,
yeah.
yeah.
Someone's not
So
here.
that would
Yeah,
put you at
July gets
June
out.
25th, and then you're starting to stare down. The 4th is on what day of the week this year?
Well, the 4th is
Wednesday.
on a Friday, and then the 10th I go to Ireland. So we're getting this done
So
before then.
straw poll, how many people are planning to take the week after or the week before the 4th, or time off before or after? Is it better to have the meeting before the 4th or after the 4th? Before the 4th.
Mm-hmm.
So I can check with M and CMRPC and see if they can commit to, the survey closes on the 15th, you have the summaries by a week later, the 22nd, instead of 10 days later. I'll see if they'll commit to that, and then it's what it takes for you to integrate the stuff in, or me and you working together to integrate the stuff in.
What's the format of what they're gonna provide?
Like you see in the appendix, so they'll have the question, and they'll have either a graph, a table, or like a pie chart, whatever is most appropriate to show that, of just the breakdown. So I think they'll be able to get that done in a week, but, you know, we're one of 43 communities that they're working with on different things, so. So you'll get it in a graph, and then it's really just pulling out the things that jump at you, that are, you know, and integrating them in where appropriate in the different sections.
So if we could get the draft by Thursday, the 27th, then people would have a weekend, and we could do Monday or Tuesday, the 1st or the 2nd. I don't know what the schedule looks like.
Reasonable suggestion.
But that would give people a weekend, so we're not getting Tuesday and
Did
then
you
you
say
have.
the draft by which day?
Well, so Thursday, the 27th, or Friday, the 28th, and then at least you've got Friday night, all day, Saturday, Sunday. I mean, you can get up early, have a coffee, it's gonna take you, what, an hour or so at least to go through it?
Christine, you're the most optimistic person about our schedules. Because I think I can take a long time to read that.
I read it with a ruler, so I take way more than an
Yeah,
hour.
so 2 hours. So I guess what I like about the idea is if you get up before the weekend, it would seem you'd have some flexibility. And then if we could have the meeting maybe on a Tuesday or a Wednesday night as opposed to a Thursday.
It depends on the
You know, it really depends
availability.
upon the
We gotta
gentleman
work upon
that's
the availability,
coaching,
but-
right? You
So
got-
can I just stop for a
Thursday
second?
we're talking about is gonna be out of the question. That's the day before the 4th of July.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
can't. So we can't do it then. So it's got to be Tuesday or Wednesday.
And
Monday
I
or
was trying to
Tuesday.
suggest it has to be Tuesday.
Tuesday's
Yeah,
the second,
that's
yeah, I'm not
fine.
gonna do the
Yeah.
third.
Aren't the
Was
selectmen's
available
meeting? Isn't that a selectmen meeting night?
What day do you wanna have it on?
Tuesday, July 2nd?
Yeah.
Okay. July 2nd is not on a Tuesday?
No, that's
Oh.
a Wednesday.
Oh, I'm in the wrong fiscal year, I'm sorry. I hate this
July
calendar on this
1st.
phone. All right, let me move to 25 and get out of 24. I
July 1st.
apologize, the 1st.
Is July 1st a Tuesday?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
I was in 24. Excuse me.
That's hilarious,
It was a good year.
because July 2nd is a Concom meeting.
No, they don't do it on the first week.
Oh, they don't?
Well, no, most places try not to book the first week of July because of the holiday, but,
Yeah.
so they're booked
we
for
will.
the 9th.
So it could be the 1st or the 2nd?
And-
In theory?
Do it the first.
First.
And a lot of these
First?
sections would have already been hopefully read for all the recommendations, which
Yeah.
is half the
Yeah.
report.
Not too
And the
much.
So
demographics,
July 1st?
like, we've already read them already for these,
Yeah,
so like half the report's already read.
yep,
It's just some grammar or small updates.
yep. So July 1st at 7 o'clock? It's Tuesday, right? Tuesday, July 1st at 7 o'clock?
And but can we somehow note that we would like the draft by at least? Now, let me
27th?
get the right date, either Thursday, June 26th, or Friday, the 27th, if the draft could be sent out to everyone.
26th or
Because
27th?
that just gives you more time. You could,
That's right, yeah. I mean, the more time you spend finishing this, it'll be done, as opposed to having to go back, I think. You know?
Yeah. I'll touch base with
Yeah.
Emily tomorrow.
Let's say we get through that day, the Tuesday, and we have it all thumbs up on it. Can we schedule that meeting with the planning board?
Well, they meet twice a month, so it's pretty quickly.
They meet the next day?
So when does the planning
I
board meet
wouldn't
in
do
July?
that.
Huh?
Right now, they're scheduled
No,
for the
because you've
7th.
got to post an agenda, so I'm
Okay.
gonna, yeah, so we won't
So-
know if it's a thumbs up, so no.
What's that?
7th and the 21st?
No, we won't.
Well,
So they
we-
meet, so the planning board meets the 7th and the 21st.
so do we both have to put an agenda? The HPP is going to present to planning, or does planning just include the HPP on its agenda?
Planning will include the HP, well, I'll double check with Laura, but I think planning, including the HPP.
that's the
But it's
7th.
not the whole group presenting. You're all in the room, nobody's deliberating. You're having the chair, I mean,
You have
whoever
an
wants to
agenda.
be in the room can be in the room, not
Right, but the
everybody.
7th is the week that we were all taken for 4th of July vacation.
I'll be there. But I won't be there shortly
It's the only
afterwards.
time
be
that
there.
it works for Wes.
Yeah.
Wes is gone after that.
Well, how
Yeah.
many weeks are you in Ireland?
3.5.
Oh, is it 3.5 now?
Oh, it's whatever it is.
So we'll.
Well, there's 15 of us. Wes doesn't have to be the presenter.
I know.
I mean, granted, you're the chair, but the chair is the facilitator, and there's 15 of us who have
We'll
read it.
Tentatively hope to be prepared for a July 7th planning
Yep.
board meeting.
So who wouldn't be here on the
But then you're
7th?
gonna have to go to selectmen too.
Yeah.
So if you're not presenting, you're waiting until the end of July to do that, so.
When's the selectmen? Or select board?
The 8th.
The next day? Oh, great. We do them both.
I, yeah, like, I don't really know, like, everything's kind of in a state of flux right now, since we don't have like, we'll have new select board members. we'll
New
have
town manager.
So I can't just guarantee that they'll put you on that agenda, but I
Yeah.
can chat.
Yep.
All right, so the
Great.
7th and the 8th is our optimistic
Mhm.
shoot for dates with those two boards.
I definitely won't be here on the 7th. And I
Huh?
won't be here on the June 9th or July 7th.
That timeline's showing a lot of optimism.
It is. It is.
Nothing wrong with
Almost
that.
as much
Nope, that's
optimism as how long it's gonna take to read it.
So no one has to take minutes at those meetings anyway, so everyone's off the hook if I'm not there. Yeah.
No? I don't want to ask, but are there any objections to us doing the participatory elements after you give your presentation, similar to the ones that were done for the last HPP? So you'll recall me talking about not just talking at people, but including them, kind of making them, asking them, allowing them to participate in the process. Last time, we had a map of the town, and we had different pictures of different kinds of housing. And there was basically a member of the group with each kind of group of people, each table, and explains, what each type of housing was. This is a duplex. This is mixed use with this on the first floor and that on the second floor. And then people talked in their group about what they liked about different forms of housing, what they didn't like, where they personally thought it should go or shouldn't go, and then everybody had their sticker and placed it where they thought it was appropriate in their town. And the other activity would be it's a chart where you have inclusionary zoning explained briefly, the things that we've discussed, cottage housing, inclusionary zoning, blah, blah, blah. And they're all color-coded, and basically, people are applying their color dot to the categories that they think Sutton should look into to solve for the 40B thing. Those are the only two activities. So they're pretty simple for group members to facilitate if people need help. And they give a pretty good, they allow people to kind of have a very kind of cut and dry say. Like, I don't think I'd never do this here. I'd only do this here. And they don't have to use all their stickers. So there's always a block that says doesn't belong in Sutton, and you can put your sticker in that block too. So it was really helpful, and we got a lot of good input from the activity last time around. And it's a simple way to include people in the process instead of just talking at them.
And so this was only done in the 2019 study, not in the 2024.
Yeah, it was only done in the 2019. Yep. Yeah, but it provided some very interesting information because people were able to literally look at a big map of the town of Sutton and think about it, think what's here and there, and look at the forms of housing and talk to other people at the table if they wanted to. You didn't have to, but there was a lot of talking going on.
Did it show the areas with the public infrastructure and what the zoning requirements are for each district?
I can certainly lay in the zoning and the infrastructure, absolutely.
Really helpful, Jen. Yeah.
So if you're good with that, or not bad with that, I will have that prepared so that there can be a participatory element, so people feel more ownership and more kind of participatory in the process. Since you won't let me do Game of Zones instead of Game of Thrones.
I like that. Why wouldn't you do that?
I like that.
I gotta know the last time I brought that up.
I have a great karaoke machine with dual microphones.
It was-
We could run.
the example.
Welcome to the Game of Zones.
If I can find the webinar video from the national conference, I will send it to you. Talk
great.
about awesome. It was just, I've never seen public discussion participants having so much fun giving serious input. It's like, it was amazing.
So just going to throw this out there. Should we consider being at Market 32 with a clipboard? Do you live in Sutton? Do you know about the new housing survey? Would really like you to fill it out. I know some people have sometimes gone there. Would there be anything to preclude people from reaching out to that for foot traffic? Like, how do you really talk to people? For example, the Manchog Post Office on a Saturday morning, I'd be willing to stand there. Hey, have you done the survey yet? Did you understand what this survey is? We're trying to do this. Would you mind? Have some paper copies. Here's a paper copy if you don't know how to get online.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly okay. I mean,
Should
we
we have a
are
goal
mailing
from-
it to everybody's house, so I would hope they'd like.
So when you do a mailing, you're going to get about 10% of the people to actually look at it.
I don't care what any way you want to, I don't see any downside to try to drive responses.
Okay.
Not 10 responses from the same person or, those kind of
Right.
things. But, no, there's no downside that I can
So-
think of in and that's why I said, just everybody on this committee talking to their friends and saying, hey, did you fill out the survey? Do you need a paper
Right.
copy? Is going to get you a good handful of
But even we
responses.
have the Memorial Day parade on Monday, so that would be an opportunity if anyone's going to be at the parade, just to work the crowd. I think, those are events where there's a lot of people that
Yep.
we could be saying, even if we have our own postcard as an example, and
Yeah.
say, this is relatively easy.
Percent of the people speak.
Right.
Yeah.
And you got 20%.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
When's
I
it-
should have some extra postcards tomorrow.
You
Those
can
go out
hand
tomorrow.
someone a postcard, right? They don't have to have it at their mailing
I
address.
think, they're hitting the mailboxes tomorrow, right?
They hit the main mail there, yeah. They were hand-delivered to Manchog today, and they go to our post office, main post office tomorrow.
Right, so they'll be in your mailbox by Saturday morning.
Right,
Yeah.
but if
For
you,
some reason you don't get one, let me know.
right, and so you can hand someone
Oh, yeah.
a survey at the
Yeah,
parade and
right.
say, I don't remember getting
Oh,
one,
I know.
here's one.
We are
You
aware.
can do that, right?
He just did
Yeah, okay.
here.
Sure.
They're not tied to your address, is what I
No, just make sure they're Sutton residents, or people who work in the town.
Well, we sure as heck don't want people from Grafton filling them out.
Goodness, no.
Hey, Grafton is a very nice town.
Absolutely.
It is.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else? Are we good?
Motion to adjourn.
Oh, wow.
I'll second.
Who seconded? You need to say your
Jerry.
name.
Jerry
Jerry
Townsend,
did.
second.
Okay.
Jim Medemar, aye.
Wesley Stanhope, aye.
Dan Spangler, aye.
Michael Gagan, aye.
Jerry Townsend, aye.
Pam Nichols, aye.
Don McKinnon, aye.
Andrew Matei, aye.
Peter Zoner, aye.
Brian Stevenson, aye.
Christine Watkins, aye.
All right.